Hello and welcome to the podcast. This is Ron's Amazing Stories. We have stories that should thrill you a little and chill you a little.
It's amazing.
You will hear adventures sent in by you guys, classic stories from the pulp mags, and episodes from the golden age of radio. We have special segments like Ghost Stories with Sylvia.
That's amazing.
And the Paranormal with Jason.
I think we're going to have a lot of fun.
So settle in for the next hour and enjoy the show. Oh, and you just might want to prepare yourself to be taken away from today.
Another 5-minute mystery.
This 5-minute mystery is being brought to you by The Story. Boy, do we have a lot of them on the show today. Stories are the communal currency of humanity, and one that we best not ignore. Now, here is our story.
Now, Sheriff, just one more question and my interview will be finished.
Okay, that paper of yours certainly wants to know everything.
What one thing in particular do you think is responsible for your excellent record in solving crimes?
Observation. Keen observation.
Uh-huh.
You can pick up a wealth of information from hearing and remembering seemingly unimportant things. I remember one time... Excuse me.
Sure.
Sheriff Crowley speaking. Yes? Suicide? Ada Belle Fredericks? I'll be there in 5 minutes.
I'm right with you, Sheriff. This is more than the paper bargained for. Shouldn't there be powder burns around the wound, Sheriff, if this is suicide?
Should be. That's why this is no suicide. It's murder.
Murder?
That's right. And I'd like to know where you two fit into the picture. I thought Miss Ada had always lived alone.
Well, I'm Mabel Foster, the old dame's niece. She asked me to come live with her 3 weeks ago as sort of a companion, I guess you'd call it.
Aunt Ada had very strange tastes in her choice of companions.
I'm just as good as you are, you money-grabbing Beethoven.
Break it up. Where do you fit in?
I'm Paul Westcott, a nephew. I came here 3 days ago to discuss some business arrangements at Aunt Ada's suggestion.
What business arrangements?
She was changing her will.
Yeah. Now I gotta share half and half with this chiseler.
I'm afraid you won't be sharing in any of it now, cousin. Murderers don't inherit.
Say, what are you insinuating? I was in the kitchen putting nail polish on my fingers when I heard the shot.
You have a nice manicure job there, Miss Foster. You know, I always smear mine. Haven't the patience to wait 5 minutes for them to dry, I guess.
Who's this female character?
A reporter. Go on.
Well, I was just finishing my left hand when Paul left.
Where'd you go?
I went out the side door to the garage, and I couldn't have shot Aunt Ada from the garage.
But I didn't kill her either. I didn't have any reason.
Seems to me you had plenty of reason, Miss Foster. Both of you.
Cousin Mabel probably wouldn't wait for me to leave. She was just fooling around with her nails waiting. I wasn't out of the house more than 3 minutes when I heard the shot. Mabel probably ran in the bedroom, got Aunt Ada's gun from the dresser drawer, and shot her.
Now I know who murdered old Ada Fredericks, and it wasn't Mabel. It was you, Paul Westcott.
Do you know how the sheriff trapped Paul even though he claimed to be in the garage at the time of the shooting? Well, in just one moment we'll hear, but first...
Well, here we are again, but with a difference. This one is more of a murder mystery that should be solvable. We have a lot of clues, and I think timing is everything. Let's see now. 3 minutes after Paul went into the garage, the shot rang out. Also, the reporter noticed the very nice job done on the fingernails of the niece. That should be more than enough to solve this one. Okay, who am I kidding here? We all know we're doomed with another silly answer, so let's go hear it.
And now, back to our mystery.
You had to be the killer, Paul. Instead of going to the garage, you opened and slammed the door to make Mabel believe you'd gone. Then you tiptoed back into the room and shot your aunt. Mabel couldn't have fired the shot because, as the reporter here said, Mabel's fingers have an unusually nice polish job. Any married man would know that a woman sits around for at least 5 minutes waving her hands in the air so her polish will dry. But you admitted seeing her put the polish on less than 3 minutes before the shot was fired. Mabel couldn't have grabbed the gun out of the dresser and fired it. If she had, her polish would be smeared.
Well, that's what I'd call having an alibi at the tip of your fingers.
Yeah, another airtight case. After all, who can refute the time it takes for a proper drying of fingernails? Certainly Mabel could not have killed the ant with wet paint on her fingers. That would have left a whole new set of clues. This 5-minute mystery was brought to you by The Story. Sometimes reality is too complex.
What's that you say?
Welcome to the podcast. We have a bundle of stories today. At least 9, in fact.
I like stories about piñatas.
Oh, well, we don't have any of those, but we do have 4 brand new These Are Your Stories that include everything from a trip to the Stanley Hotel to a wall-walking shadow.
Is there anything else?
There is. Featured are 2 sci-fi pulp mag stories that should make you giggle or at least smile. Then Mother Goose gets us going with a story called The Accomplished and Lucky Teakettle.
How pretentious.
Hey, it's all in the eyes of the beholder.
That's true. That is true.
Thank you. I received a number of comments from you guys about the story The Misplaced Battleship that we played over the last 2 weeks. The reviews were split. Some of you loved the story. A few hated it, and some didn't like having the story presented in 2 parts. I guess I want to address why I played this one. For me, I'm a huge fan of Harry Harrison. However, I have not been able to share his works with you because, well, frankly, it's all copyrighted. Then I found that story. The running time was over an hour, so I knew I had to play it in 2 parts. No choice on that. Radio show requirements. But the story gave me an added benefit, and that was to be able to have some podcast time off during Thanksgiving. I thought to myself, hey, the listeners are not stuck with a replay. So there you have it, a win-win for all of us, except for maybe those of you who didn't like the story. Sorry about that. This past Tuesday, I published the 3rd installment of the new podcast, These Are Your Stories. In this edition, Earl Patrick Ross tells us what life is like as an antiquarian in Utah. How does he know? All you gotta do is head to the blog site and listen for yourself. I'll have a link in the show notes. I received a couple notes asking if this means that These Are Your Stories won't be a part of Ron's Amazing Stories anymore. As you will hear later in the program, that isn't going to happen. These Are Your Stories, the podcast, will be for live callers. The segment version will continue on and will be for those stories that are sent in via text form. I will read those as I always have. I hope that sets your fears to rest. Now, what is this project? While it's starting out as blog posts, the plan is for a brand new podcast by the same name, or perhaps a new one. This will be a live call-in show. I will host it, and you guys will call in with your stories. I'm working on the logistics, and I'm doing some test runs, which will be posted as blogs. What I'm looking for right now are folks who want to be part of the testing process. So if you want to be a guinea pig, please let me know by heading to the main website and using the Contact tab. All manners of stories are welcome, so please consider taking part. And now, how about this message from Audible? Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook and a 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/Ron's Amazing Stories. They have over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, computer, Kindle. Whatever you have, you can listen to Audible on it. So what am I listening to right now? Zero G by Dan Wells, which is another Audible original. It is an incredible story. It's about one kid nicknamed Zero versus an entire band of space pirates. It begins simple enough. Zero is just one of 20,000 people aboard a spaceship bound for a new planet set to be colonized. Here is a clip of what you can expect to hear.
It's hard to choose a favorite thing about outer space. But if Zero Huang had to pick just one, it would be gravity. Or more specifically, the complete lack of gravity. Planets were pretty cool, but in space, he could fly. Which was why, waiting in the giant line to board the Pathfinder, he was sitting on the ceiling.
You're supposed to hold the railing.
Zero's mom, of course, was holding the railing tightly. She always followed the rules. In fact, looking up and down the long, straight hallway on Abassi Station, almost all of the passengers were holding onto the railing, grasping it tightly to keep from floating away. The only ones who weren't were kids like Zero. Though at 12 years old, he was probably the oldest of the goof-offs. All of them were wearing the one-piece coveralls that marked them as Pathfinder passengers.
Just hold the stupid railing, Zero.
Yan was Zero's middle brother, almost 15 years old, and always acted like he was in charge.
Don't call him Zero.
Their father had his nose deep in a book. Not a tablet book like a normal person reads, but a real, old, dead tree book like they used to read in the olden days. He wasn't holding the railing either. Instead, he had his foot hooked under a bar that ran along the floor. That's how the real space travelers did it, he'd told them. Keep your foot under the bar and you can stay in one place and use both your hands, just like on Earth. Zero's father was kind of an expert in that stuff. After all, he was one of the engineers who'd built the Pathfinder. Yaozu Huang had spent most of the last 5 years on Abassi Station, overseeing the construction. Zero still thought he was probably wrong about the floor bars, though, because why would a real space traveler want to stick to the floor like that? You could literally fly up here. Railings were for losers. Zero's parents hated it when his brothers called him Zero, but Zero didn't mind it. Anything was better than his real name, Sushu, because then his brothers would call him...
You mean Tushu?
Yep, that's what they'd call him. It wasn't even an insult. Zero didn't know why they called him that, but he still hated it, which he supposed was probably why they called him that.
Come on down, Tushu. Put those two shoes on the floor.
My name is Zero.
Park was Zero's oldest brother, already 16, which was apparently old enough that he considered his brothers to be completely beneath his notice. Most of the time, at least. If he was teasing Zero now, that probably meant he was bored. Better bored than cranky, Zero decided. Park had a girlfriend, but her family wasn't part of the Pathfinder mission. He could text her for a few more hours. Abassi Station had great reception. But then they'd board the ship, settle in, take off, and Park would never see her again. They'd never see anyone again, really. Unless that person were on the Pathfinder, too. Or maybe the Torchbearer. After more than a century of searching, the human race had finally found 2 habitable planets, called Genji and Kaguya, orbiting a star called Murasaki, and they'd built 2 colony ships to go out and settle them. The Torchbearer mission had left last month, and last week it had cleared the solar system and boosted the Medina star drive, accelerating to almost 1/5 of light speed. In about a month, Pathfinder would clear the solar system and do the same. But even at that speed, the journey would take a very long time. Murasaki was more than 20 light years away. The Pathfinder, and everyone on it, would be traveling for 105 years.
The journey will take over a century to complete, but luckily everyone is in stasis. Everyone, that is, but Zero. His pod has malfunctioned, waking him up 100 years too early. At first, Zero is excited to be roaming the ship alone, but that quickly turns into a heart-stopping interstellar adventure when a family of space pirates show up. Their goal? Well, to hijack the ship and take the colonizers hostage. With everyone he knows fast asleep, it's up to Zero to think fast and find a way to stop them all by himself. Now, you can have Zero G today. Here's what Audible has set up for us. They are offering a free audiobook and 30 days to give you the opportunity to check out their service. To download your free audiobook today, go to audibletrial.com/Ron's Amazing Stories. Again, that's audibletrial.com/Ron's Amazing Stories, and you too can have Zero G's adventure all to yourself. Thank you, Audible. And now, it's time for your stories.
These are your stories, sent by you, for you.
Welcome back to These Are Your Stories. We've not had this segment for the past 2 weeks due to the length of our featured story, The Misplaced Battleship. That is the only reason. So let's get to your stories. In this edition, we're going to have some short tales that I've been holding on to. In most cases, these are responses to other stories and are too short to use. This first one comes from Chanel Whitman, who lives in Atlanta, Georgia. Hello, Ron. I loved your stories this week. I guess I should have said our stories. I've had 2 experiences in my life that have put little doubt that there are spirits, or at least supernatural beings. When I was younger, my friend and I were playing upstairs in my mother's bedroom. As we were finishing up, we made our way down the hallway. You had to pass my bedroom to get to the stairs. As we pass, we both peer in, and what do we see? A little man sitting on the edge of my bed, clear as day, clear as both of us standing next to each other. What set this apart was that we both saw it, we both remember it vividly and crystal clear. He was just sitting there, smiling, and then he vanished. The other day I ran into my friend at the post office. I asked her if she remembered that day. She reached for her phone and produced a photo. It was a hand-drawn picture of that little man. Then she said, "Every damn day." Another experience was when I was on my way out the door to school with my mother. At the time, we had no pets and my father was out of town. As we were leaving the house, it sounded as if someone was jumping up and down. We glanced up to my bedroom window, and there was that little man again. My mom ran upstairs to see what was going on, and when she got there, the room was empty. We quickly left, but we both vividly remembered this as well. We never saw that little man again, so it seems the spirit may have just moved on. Chanel Whitman, Atlanta, Georgia. Well, that is an interesting story. She sent that in response to a fairy story we had some time ago on the show. I think she might be thinking what I am thinking, and that is that this was fairy folk. Chanel, I want to thank you for sharing your story. This next short comes from Boyd Ortiz, who didn't say where he was from, but I suspect it might be Colorado, but I can't be sure. Hello, Ron. I'm writing in response to your 2 stories about the Accomplished Hotel. I was recently at the Stanley Hotel in Colorado, and I experienced some weird stuff. This was all very late at night, like 1 a.m. to 3 a.m. In the lower section below the big staircase, there are these stone steps. As I walked up them, a second set of footsteps followed me. I tried to replicate it to see if it was an echo, but I never could. In the music room, we tried talking to Lucy, and when she didn't respond, we asked if she wanted us to leave. A chair slid on the floor as if someone scooted it back to get up from a table. We then heard a knock. We used an app called the Necrophonic Spirit Box. When we asked for spirits to move a lampshade, we clearly heard the app say, "It's a lamp." Later, we heard a female voice whisper, "Sorry," in an empty hallway. There were other random words, but none of those made any sense. All in all, a pretty profitable visit to the old Stanley Hotel. I want to thank you for your podcast. I love to visit hotels and do my form of situational ghost hunts. Because of your show, we have added the Adolphus and Roosevelt hotels to our bucket list. Boyd Ortiz, possibly from Colorado. Thank you for that, Boyd. I had to look up Lucy, who you mentioned. Many years ago at the Stanley Hotel, a young girl named Lucy was found in the hotel basement peeping at some construction plans. The staff found out about it and threw her into the cold where she froze to death, and she now haunts the concert hall and the basement. How about that? There have been numerous photos of the girl and is well documented by ghost hunters. You know, that must be one creepy place. This story comes from Halloween and was sent in by Christy Hughes from Modesto, California. Hi there. My story begins on Halloween midday. We were all in the living room talking about celebrating Halloween COVID style when my 3-year-old niece popped her head around the hallway and said hello to something unseen. She then ran screaming into my nephew's arms and wouldn't look towards the hallway or let go. Add in the dogs acting very strangely, so I decided to go and check. I said, "Stop being silly. There's nothing or nobody there." As I walked out of the living room, the dogs started snarling. Not really knowing what to do, I walked back into the front room, and then my niece screamed again. I turned around and saw a black shadow moving along the wall. As it moved towards us, it faded and then disappeared. All of us there that day saw it, and we all agreed that whatever it was, it felt angry. Ron, do you have any ideas on what we saw? Christy Hughes, Modesto, California. I have to be honest and say I have no idea what you saw. It does not fall into the typical shadow category because they are almost always seen in a darkened room. I've never heard of one in broad daylight before. How very strange. Thank you for your story, Christy. I have no explanation. Our last These Are Your Stories of the day comes from Frida Boone from Los Angeles, California. I had some trouble with this one during the editing process, and I never got a response back from Frida. Frida, I hope I got the details correct. My family has always said that we are cursed with the Boone curse. Apparently, decades ago, my great-grandfather made a deal of some sort to have a booming moonshine business. Ever since then, my family has been hassled by spirits. When I was younger, weird things would happen in our house, but I would always just brush it off as nothing. In the past 2 years, things have been strange. It all started one night when the hangers in my closet just started randomly moving and making noise. That freaked me out, but I still went to sleep. In the morning, most of them had fallen on the ground. From this, things became progressively worse. About a month later, random toys in my house would all start making noise at the same time, and I'd always feel like something was watching me. My dog would go crazy and start growling in a certain direction towards the dining room. Eventually, I got rid of the toys and things calmed down for a while. Then one night I was in bed on my phone and facing the wall when I heard what sounded like a footstep behind me, followed by a high-pitched snarl. It completely terrified me, but I don't know way I was going to turn around. The snarl came again, and the closet door flew open on its own. The hangers started rattling again. I wanted out of there, but I found I couldn't move. I screamed, and then everything went silent. I guess the thing was satisfied and moved on. Nothing too much happened after that. The most recent thing was when I came home from a friend's house, I found the hangers on the floor again. I've told many people about this. Most don't believe me. That is, until they come over to my house. Frida Boone, Los Angeles, California. Okay, that's frightening. I'm not sure I would ever want to come home again after that. Thank you for sharing your story with us, Frida. It is amazing. Well, those are your stories for this time. If you have a story that you want to share, like Frida did, head to the main website at ronsamazingstories.com and click on the story submission banner. Make your stories our stories. We are going to feature 2 Pulp Mag stories this week that couldn't be more different. The first is a humorous science fiction tale that first appeared in Astounding Science Fiction in May of 1959. It was written by Roger Kuykendall, and I couldn't find anything about the man, which probably means that's not his real name. The story is called We Didn't Do Anything Wrong, Hardly, and it is read for us by Craig Franklin.
We Didn't Do Anything Wrong, Hardly, by Roger Kuykendall. I mean, it isn't like we swiped anything. We maybe borrowed a couple of things but gee, we put everything back like we found it pretty near. Even like the compressor we got from Stinky Brinker that his old man wasn't using, and I traded my outboard motor for. My father made me trade back. But it was like Skinny said. You know, Skinny Thompson. He's the one you guys keep calling the boy genius, but shucks, he's no... Well, yeah, it's like Skinny said. We didn't need an outboard motor, and we did need a compressor. You've got to have a compressor on a spaceship. Everybody knows that. And that old compression chamber that old man, Mr. Fields, let us use didn't have a compressor. Sure, he said we could use it. Anyway, he said we could play with it, and Skinny said we were going to make a spaceship out of it, and he said go ahead. Well, no, he didn't say it exactly like that. Like he didn't take it serious, sort of. Anyway, it made a swell spaceship. It had 4 portholes on it, and an airlock, and real bunks in it, and lots of room for all that stuff that Skinny put in there. But it didn't have a compressor, and that's why... What stuff? Oh, you know, the stuff that Skinny put in there, like the radars he made out of a TV set, and the anti-gravity and the atomic power plant he invented to run it all with. He's awfully smart, Skinny is. But he's not like what you'd think of a genius. You know, He's not all the time using big words, and he doesn't look like a genius. I mean, we call him Skinny because he used to be skinny. But he isn't now. I mean, he's maybe small for his age, anyway smaller than me, and I'm the same age as he is. Of course, I'm big for my age, so that doesn't mean much, does it? Well, I guess Stinker Brinker started it. He's always riding Skinny about one thing or another, but Skinny never gets mad. And it's a good thing for Stinker, too. I saw Skinny clean up a bunch of ninth graders. Well, a couple of them anyway. They were saying... Well, I guess I won't tell you what they were saying. Anyway, Skinny used judo. I guess because that wasn't much of a fight. Anyway, Stinker said something about how he was going to be a rocket pilot when he grew up, and I told him that Skinny had told me that there wouldn't be any rockets, and that anti-gravity would be the thing as soon as it was invented. So Stinker said it never would be invented, and I said it would so, and he said it would not, and I said, well, if you're going to keep interrupting me, how can I... All right, anyway, Skinny broke into the argument and said that he could prove mathematically that anti-gravity was possible, and Stinker said, sure, he could, and Skinny said, sure he could, and Stinky said, sure he could, like that. Honestly, is that any way to argue? I mean, it sounds like two people agreeing, only Stinky keeps going, sure, like that, you know, and Stinky, what does he know about mathematics? He's had to take remedial arithmetic ever since... No, I don't understand how the anti-gravity works, Skinny told me. But it was something about meson flow and stuff like that, and I didn't understand. The atomic power plant made more sense. Where did we get the uranium? Gee, no, we couldn't afford uranium, so Skinny invented a hydrogen fusion plant. Anyone can make hydrogen. You just take zinc and sulfuric acid and deuterium. You mean like heavy hydrogen? No, Skinny said it would probably work better, but like I said, we couldn't afford anything fancy. As it was, Skinny had to pay $5 or $6 for that special square tubing in the anti-gravity, and the plastic space helmets we had cost us 98 cents each. And it cost $1.50 for the special tube that Skinny needed to make a TV set into a radar. You see, we didn't steal anything, really. It was mostly stuff that was just lying around, like the TV set was up in my attic, and the old refrigerator that Skinny used the parts to make the atomic power plant out of from. And then a lot of the stuff we already had, like the skin diving suits we'd made into spacesuits, and the vacuum pump that Skinny had already, and the generator. Sure, we did a lot of skin diving, but that was last summer. That's how we knew about old man Brinker's compressor that Stinky said was his, and I traded my outboard motor for, and had to trade back. And that's how we knew about Mr. Field's oil compression chamber and all that. The rocket? Well, it worked on the same principle as the atomic power plant, only it doesn't work except in a vacuum, hardly. Of course, you don't need much of a rocket when you have anti-gravity. Everyone knows that. Well, anyway, that's how we built the spaceship. And believe me, it wasn't easy. I mean, with Stinky all the time bothering us and laughing at us. And I had to do a lot of lawn mowing to get money for the square tubing for the anti-gravity, the special tube for the radar, and my space helmet. Stinky called the space helmets kid stuff. He was always saying things like, say hello to the folks on Mars for me, and bring back a bottle of Canal number 5, and all like that, you know. Of course, they did look like kid stuff, I guess. We bought them at the 5 and dime, and they were meant for kids. Of course, when Skinny got through with them, they worked fine. We tested them in the airlock of the compression chamber when we got the compressor in. They tested out pretty good for half an hour. Then we tried them on in there. Well, it wasn't a complete vacuum, just 27 inches of mercury, but that was okay for a test. So anyway, we got ready to take off. Stinky was there to watch, of course. He was saying things like, farewell, oh brave pioneers, and stuff like that. I mean, it was enough to make you sick. He was standing there, laughing and singing something like, Up in the Air, Junior Birdman. But when we closed the airlock door, we couldn't hear him. Skinny started up the atomic power plant, and we could see Stinky laughing fit to kill. It takes a couple of minutes to warm up, you know, so Stinky started throwing rocks to attract our attention, and Skinny was scared that he'd crack a porthole or something, so he threw the switch, and we took off. Boy, you should have seen Stinky's face. I mean, you really should have seen it. One minute he was laughing, you know, and next minute he looked like a goldfish. I guess he always did look like a goldfish, but I mean, even more like then. And he was getting smaller and smaller because we had taken off. We were gone pretty near 6 hours, and it's a good thing my mum made me to take a lunch. Sure, I told her where we were going. Well, anyway, I told her we were maybe going to fly around the world in Skinny and my spaceship, or maybe go down to Carson's Pond. And she made me take a lunch, and made me promise I wouldn't go swimming alone, and I sure didn't. But we did go around the world 3 or 4 times. I lost count. Anyway, that's when we saw the satellite on radar, so Skinny pulled the spaceship over to it, and we got out and looked at it. The spacesuits worked fine too. Gosh, no, we didn't steal it or anything. Like Skinny said, it was just a menace to navigation and the batteries were dead and it wasn't working right anyway. So we tied it onto the spaceship and took it home. No, we had to tie it on top. It was too big to take inside with the antenna sticking out. Of course, we found out how to fold them later. Well, anyway, the next day, the Russians started squawking about a capitalist plot, and someone had to swipe their satellite. Gee, I mean, with all the satellites up there, who'd miss just one? So I got worried that they'd found out that we took it. Of course, I didn't need to worry, because Dinky told them all right, just like a tattletale. So anyway, after Skinny got the batteries recharged, we put it back. When we landed, there were hundreds of people standing there. And Mr. Anderson from the State Department, I guess you know the rest. Except Mr. Anderson started laughing when we told him, and he said it was the best joke on the Russians he had ever heard. I guess it is when you think about it. I mean, the Russians complaining about somebody swiping their satellite, and then the State Department answering a couple of kids borrowed it, but they put it back. One thing that bothers me, though, we didn't put it back exactly the way we found it. But I guess it doesn't matter. You see, when we put it back, we goofed a little. I mean, we put it back in the same orbit, more or less. But we got it going in the wrong direction.
You gotta love sarcasm in a fun story. I thought the reader did a great job of grasping the irony of it all. In 1985, a few years ago, there was a feature film called The Explorers. The film stars Ethan Hawke, River Phoenix, and Jason Pressen as teenage boys who build a spacecraft to explore outer space. If you have seen that film, you have to wonder if it was inspired by this story. I think it just might have been. Our second story is also a little on the sarcastic side, but leans more towards fantasy than science fiction. Has your television ever had trouble that required a repairman? That is the premise of this story titled Something Will Turn Up, and it is read for us by Corey Samuel.
You, Mr. Rapp? Stanley Rapp blinked, considering the matter. He always thought over everything very carefully. Of course, some questions were easier to answer than others. This one, for instance. He had very few doubts about his name. Stanley Rapp said. Yes. He stared at the bearded young man. Living in the village, even on the better side of it, one saw beards every day, all shapes and sizes of beard. This one was not a psychoanalyst beard, or a folk singer beard, not even an actor beard. This was the scraggly variety, almost certainly a poet beard. Mr. Rapp, while holding no particular prejudice against poets, had not sent for one, he was sure of that. Then he noticed the tool case in the bearded young man's hand, lettered large, Lightning Service, TV, Hi-Fi. Oh, Stanley said, nodding. You're the man to fix the TV set. You know it, Dad, the young man said, coming in. He shut the door behind him and stared around the apartment. What a wild pad! Where the idiot box, hey? The pleasantly furnished, neat little apartment was not what Mr. Rapp had ever thought of as a wild pad. But the village had odd standards, Mr. Rapp knew. Chacun à son goût, he had said, on moving into the apartment 10 years ago. Not aloud, of course, because he had only taken 1 year of French and would never have trusted his accent. But chacun à son goût anyway. The television set, Mr. Rapp said, translating. Oh, yes. He went to the closet door and opened it. Reaching inside, he brought out an imposingly large TV set, mounted on a wheeled table. The bearded repairman whistled. In the closet? the repairman said admiringly. Crazy. You go in there to watch it, or you let it talk to itself? Oh, well, I don't exactly watch it at all, Mr. Rapp said, a little sadly. I mean, I can't. That's why I called you. Lightning's here, have no fear, the bearded one said, approaching the set with a professional air. Like, in the closet, hey. He bent over the set, appraisingly. I thought you were a square, Pops, but I can see you're... Hey, this is like too much. Man, I don't want to pry, but why is this box upside down? I wish I knew, Mr. Rapp said. He sat down and leaned back, sighing. This was going to be difficult, he knew. He had already had to explain it to the last 3 repairmen, and he was getting tired of explaining. Although he thought, somehow, that this young man might understand it a little more quickly than the others had. I've had a couple of other repairmen look it over, Mr. Rapp told the bearded one. They gave up. Dilettantes, commented the beard. Oh no, Mr. Rapp said. One of them was from the company that made it, but they couldn't do anything. Let's try it, the repairman said, plugging the cord into a wall socket. He returned to the set and switched it on, without changing its upside-down position. The big screen lit almost at once. A pained face appeared, with a large silhouetted hammer striking the image's forehead in a rhythmic beat. Immediate relief from headache, a bland voice said, as the pictured face broke into a broad smile. The repairman shuddered and turned down the sound, staring at the image with widened eyes as he did so. Dad, I don't want to bug you, the repairman said, his eyes still on the screen. Only, look, the set is upside down, right? Right, said Mr. Rapp. Only the picture. The repairman paused, trying to find the right phrase. I mean, the picture's flipped, like it's wrong side up too, only right side up now. Exactly, said Mr. Rapp. You see, that's the trouble. I put the set upside down because of that. Cool, the repairman said, watching the picture. I mean, so why worry? You got a picture, right? You want me to turn the picture around? I can do that with a little fiddling around inside the set. Uh-oh. Dad, something's happening. The repairman bent closer, staring at the picture. It was now showing a busty young woman singer, her mouth opened, but silent, since the sound was turned down. She was slowly rotating as Rapp and the bearded repairman watched, turning until her face, still mouthing silent song, hung upside down on the screen. It always does that, Rapp said. No matter which way I put the set, the picture's always upside down. No, man, the repairman said, pleadingly. Look, I took a course. I mean, the best school, you dig? It don't work that way. It just can't. It does, though, Rapp pointed out. And that's what the other repair people said, too. They took it out and brought it back, and it still did it. Not when they had it in their shops, but the minute it came back here, the picture went upside down again. Wow, the repairman said, backing slowly away from the set, but watching it with the tense gaze of a man who expected trouble. After a minute, he moved toward it again, and took hold of the cabinet's sides, lifting. I don't want to put you down, Pops, he said, grunting. Only, I got to see this. Over she goes. He set it down again, right side up. The picture, still the singer's face, remained in a relatively upright position for another moment, and then slowly rolled over, upside down again. You see, Mr. Rapp said, shrugging. I guess I'll have to buy another set, except I'd hate to have it happen again, and this one did cost quite a lot. You couldn't trade it in, either, the repairman agreed. Not to me, anyway. Suddenly, he snapped his fingers. Hey now, sideways? You mean on its side? Just for kicks. The repairman gripped the set again. On the side. He set the cabinet down on one side and stepped back to regard the picture again. Slowly, the picture turned once more, and once again, relative to the usual directions of up and down, the picture was stubbornly, completely inverted. It's on to that, too, the repairman said gloomily. He sat down on the floor and assumed a kind of yoga posture, peering between his legs. You could try it this way, pups. I'm pretty stiff, Mr. Rapp told him, shaking his head. Yeah, the repairman said, reinverting himself. For a long while he sat, pulling his beard thoughtfully, a look of deep thought on his face. The reversed singer faded out, to give place to an earnestly grinning announcer who pointed emphatically to a large upside-down sign bearing the name of a product. Watching it this way could get to be a fad, the repairman said at last, almost inaudibly. He fell silent again, and Mr. Rapp, sadly, began to realize that even this bearded and confident young man had apparently been stopped, like the others. The way I look at it, like, there's a place where science hangs up, the bearded one spoke, finally. Like, I don't want to put down my old guru at the 2nd Avenue School of Electronics, he added solemnly. But you got to admit that there are things not dreamed of in your philosophy, Horatio. You dig? My name isn't Horatio, Mr. Rapp objected. I was quoting, the repairman told him. I mean, this is a thing like outside material means. Supernatural, sort of. Did you cross up any witches lately, Pops? Oh dear, Mr. Rapp said sadly. He shook his head. No, I haven't, offended any witches. Not that I know of. He regarded the inverted picture for a moment. Then, as the repairman's words began to sink in, Mr. Rapp looked at him apprehensively. Witches? Mr. Rapp asked. But, I mean, that's all superstition, isn't it? And anyway, well, television sets. They used to dry up cows, but who keeps cows? The bearded one said ominously. Why not television sets? Like, I happen to be personally acquainted with several witches and like that. The village is full of them. However, he rose and stalked toward the set, his eyes glittering in a peculiar way. You're a lucky one, Daddy-O. Back in my square days, I did some reading up on the hookups between poetry and magic. Now I'm a poet. Therefore, and to wit, I'm also a magician. On this hang-up, I'm going to try magic. Electronics won't work, that's for sure. But Mr. Rapp was not quite sure why he disapproved, but he did. On the other hand, the repairman appeared to be very definitely sure of what he was doing as he peered into the back of the television set. Have you ever tried, this method before? Never ran into any hexed TV sets before, the repairman said, straightening up. Don't worry, though, I got the touch, like with poetry. Same thing, in fact. All magic spells rhyme, see? Well, I used to rhyme back before I really started swinging. Anybody can rhyme, and the rest is just instinct. He had been scribbling something on a notepad as he spoke. Now he bent down to take another look at the back of the set, and nodded with an air of assurance. The tube layout, the repairman told Mr. Rapp, exhibiting his notebook. That, and Ohm's law, and a couple of Hindu bits I picked up listening to the UN on the radio, makes a first-class spell. Mr. Rapp backed away nervously. Look, if it's all the same to you... Don't flip. The repairman consulted his notebook, and moved to stand in front of the screen. The picture showed a smiling newscaster, pointing to a map which indicated something ominous. Cool, man, the repairman said. Here we go. He lifted his hands in an ecclesiastical gesture, and his voice became a deep boom. 6SN7 AC5, 6 and 7 millivolts are running down the line. E equals R times A, that's the way it goes. Round the other way, Subhash Chandra Bose. Afterward, Mr. Rapp was never quite sure exactly what happened. He had an impression of a flash of light, and an odd, indefinite sound, rather like the dropping of a cosmic garbage can lid. But possibly neither the light nor the sound actually happened. At any rate, there were no complaints from the neighbours later on. However, the lighted screen was certainly doing something. Crazy, the repairman said, in awed tones. Mr. Rapp, his view partly blocked by the repairman, could not see exactly what was happening on the screen. However, he he caught a brief glimpse of the newscaster's face. It was right side up, but no longer smiling. Instead, the pictured face wore a look of profound alarm, and the newsman was apparently leaning far forward, his face almost out of focus because of its nearness to the lens. Just for a moment, Mr. Rapp could have sworn he saw a chair floating up, past the agonized expression on the screen. Then the screen went grey, and a panel of lettering appeared, shaking slightly. Our picture has been temporarily interrupted. Normal service will be restored as soon as possible. Please stand by. I was going to give you a bill, the repairman said. Only, maybe we'd better just charge it up to customer relations. The letters remained steady on the screen, and Mr. Rapp studied them. They were right side up. You fixed it, Mr. Rapp said, a little uncertainly. I mean, it's working. I ought to pay. I goofed, the repairman said. He picked up his tools and moved toward the door. Like, I won't mention it to anybody if you won't, but I goofed, all right? Didn't you see the picture? But whatever you did, it worked, Mr. Rapp said. The picture's right side up. I know, the repairman said. Only somewhere there's a studio that's upside down. I just goofed, Pops, that's all. He closed the door behind him, leaving Mr. Rapp still staring at the immobile, right side up message on the glowing screen.
That story appeared in Analog magazine in February of 1963. It was written by David Mason, and again, I couldn't find any information about him. The best I could do was a poet by the same name who would have been 5 years old when that was published. Probably not him. The story idea I thought was pretty unique. You have to keep in mind that in 1963 televisions were still considered magical, and how they worked was beyond most people's technical prowess. Still, a cute story read very well by Corey Samuel, who has read for us before. Thank you, Corey. Are you ready for another story? This one is being brought to us by Gladys Goodies. Good treats for your dog to eat. They use all natural products with no sugar, preservatives, salts, or harmful ingredients. So check out their online store at GladysGoodies.com. That is GladysGoodies.com. And don't forget to use our very own promo code, RONS, to get a 20% discount on all of your purchases. That is RONS. Thank you, Gladys.
As read by. Amazing stories read by amazing people.
This time on As Read By, we have a story about a tea kettle with a life of its own. It comes from the coffers of Mother Goose and is just too cute. I love this story, and is with all Mother Goose stories, it has a lesson to be learned. Do you think you can find it? Please enjoy The Accomplished and Lucky Teakettle.
A long time ago, at a temple called Marinji, in the province of Joshu, there was an old tea kettle. One day, when the priest of the temple was about to hang it over the hearth to boil the water for its tea, to his amazement, the kettle all of a sudden put forth the head and tail of a badger. What a wonderful kettle, to come out all over fur! The priest, thunderstruck, called in the novices of the temple to see the sight, and whilst they were stupidly staring, one suggesting one thing and another, the kettle, jumping up into the air, began flying about the room. More astonished than ever, the priest and his pupils tried to pursue it, but no thief or cat was ever half so sharp as this wonderful badger kettle. At last, however, they managed to knock it down and secure it, and holding it in with their united efforts, they forced it into a box, intending to carry it off and throw it away in some distant place, so that they might no more be plagued by the goblin. For this day their troubles were over. But, as luck would have it, the tinker, who was in the habit of working for the temple, called in, and the priest suddenly bethought him that it was a pity to throw away the kettle for nothing, and that he might as well get a trifle for it, no matter how small. So he brought out the kettle, which had resumed its former shape, and had got rid of its head and tail, and showed it to the tinker. When the tinker saw the kettle, he offered 20 copper coins for it, and the priest was only too glad to close the bargain and be rid of his troublesome piece of furniture. But the tinker trudged off home with his pack and his new purchase. That night, as he lay asleep, he heard a strange noise near his pillow. So he peered out from under the bedclothes, and there he saw the kettle that he had bought in a temple, covered with fur, and walking about on 4 legs. The tinker started up in a fright to see what it all could mean, when all of a sudden the kettle resumed its former shape. This happened over and over again, until at last the tinker showed the tea kettle to a friend of his, who said, "This is certainly an accomplished and lucky tea kettle. You should take it about as a show, with songs and accompaniments of musical instruments, and make it dance and walk on the tightrope." The tinker, thinking this good advice, made arrangements with a showman and set up an exhibition. The noise of the kettle's performances soon spread abroad, until even the princes of the land sent to order the tinker to come to them, and he grew rich beyond all his expectations. Even the princesses, too, and the great ladies of the court took great delight in the dancing kettle, so that no sooner had it shown its tricks in one place than it was time for them to keep some other engagement. At last, the tinker grew so rich that he took the kettle back to the temple, where it was laid up as a precious treasure and worshipped as a saint.
There you have it. So, what did you learn? For me, it was to not throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Well, that can't be right.
Oh, can't it? That tale was also read by our friend to the podcast, Corey Samuel. Very nice job, Corey, and thank you.
Another public service announcement from Brill Cream. Men, beware. Use 1 dab of Brill Cream. Just a little dab makes your hair look excitingly clean, disturbingly healthy. This man dared to use 2 dabs. Now he's in trouble. We refuse to be responsible.
Brill Cream, Brill Cream, Brill Cream. Brill Cream, a little dab will do ya. Brill Cream, you look so debonair. Brill Cream, the gals will all pursue ya. They'll love to get their fingers in your hair.
That was episode number 468, and these are the people that made it happen. Chanel Whitman, Boyd Ortiz, Christy Hughes, Frida Boone, and Corey Samuel. My thanks to you all. If you want to follow the podcast or the blog, head to ronsamazingstories.com. There you will find any of the links I mentioned and how to contact us. Do you want to help the show? The best thing you can do is to tell your friends all about it, and please leave reviews or feedback wherever you listen. Clicking that follow or like button makes us grow. Thank you for listening, and I hope you come again to find out what are Ron's Amazing Stories.